Welcome to Shaman Radio Podcast. I'm Jon Rasmussen, and today I have Taryn Voget, who is the founder of Everyday Genius. I've known Taryn for well over a decade now. Her work is amazing. I'll let her tell you more about it. We worked together recently in her Genius Lab myself, and I've learned things about myself for the first time that I hadn't known. And so it's the most extraordinary work, I think, happening today. And I can't wait to share all of it with you today. Welcome, Taryn. Thank you for coming on with me.
Jon, thanks so much for having me. It's fun that we're doing this. I'm excited to talk about your Genius Lab and some of the cool stuff that we discovered when we interviewed you.
Absolutely. And I've noticed that there's a few things you started posting on your various channels about it, and I'm loving it because it's like really helpful. And what I really love about it is it's not just about shamans. It's not just about folks like you and I who have devoted their life to studying deep psychology and subconscious and body language and eye movements and all this stuff. It really is helpful for anyone and everyone in any walk of life to just be more insightful, just more self-aware, and therefore be able to exercise their genius, right? Their work, their gifts, to give their gifts to the world in the best way possible. And that's what we're all about.
Well,
Tell me how you got there.
yeah. Yeah, so that was my intention with Everyday Genius many years ago. And just to kind of give the listeners a bit of background, I want to say it was about 15 years ago. I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life next. Kind of one chapter had ended, but the new one hadn't started. And I felt this flash of lightning hit my head. Literally, it felt like a bolt of lightning. And I saw this whole vision, and I even got the name for what at the time was the Everyday Genius Institute. And the idea would be that we would deconstruct people that were good at what they do and how they do it on a very subconscious level, and then package it back up in an educational product series so that anyone could learn the strategies of genius and shortcut their own learning curve. And that iteration of Everyday Genius lasted about four or 5 years. And it came up, and that's, Jon, when you and I met, and I'll tell that fun story in a minute. But that was when I came out with, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 products that really were focused on very specific topics, like how to taste wine like a pro, how to write words that sell, how to, study strategies of straight A students, just kind of everyday topics that people would want. And the educational product line was a book and a DVD set. And it was probably the most intense creative work of my life. And in the process of doing that, that's when I realized, well, I met you, number one, but number two is I thought, gosh, there's got to be a way to go even deeper with this work. And that's what got me to shaman school. And so it was really you that was the impetus for that. I kind of set down Everyday Genius. I went to shaman school, did a bunch of other things, kind of went back into the corporate world, and then picked Everyday Genius back up recently because I felt like it was ready for another life, another way to do it. And so I reopened up the Genius Lab, and it was so fun having you in there where we got to deconstruct your genius. And I think the time away has given me a chance to take this in a deeper level, a more spiritual level, because what I've realized, it's like anything, you get layers of insight, is genius is not something mystical and magical. It is something accessible to everybody. And it is an ability to tap into a quantum field that people do very intuitively, even though it sounds like magical and mystical. It is something that you can learn to do, and people do it very intuitively. And that's what looks like genius. So we can talk more about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when you first started this, and I thought it was incredible, and like everyone would want to do it, and I still believe that, and I think it's like, again, it's not what I love about what you're doing now, right, is that, again, it's not about becoming something you're not, or becoming like that person, or doing this kind of getting good at this or that or the other thing. Like, this is literally now tapping into, people always ask us, like, what's my purpose? What am I really here to do? I mean, I get that all the time in my session work, right? And I do what I do, and I try to clear the way for them to find to have it find them. I say, like show up in their face and be obvious, because why not if you can have it that way? And it's like, but what you do takes that all to a whole new level and makes it even easier to like tap into, wow, that's what I do. Like, that's what I do. That's what I'm good at. Like, this is my genius. This is my gift and my purpose. And so I think it's super exciting because now is the time for that to happen. And I think, I probably, when we first met, you'll have to tell the story because I think you tell it best. But I've been known to be able to see people, and typically, like, I'm the shaman, right? Like a lot of people that come to me, it's like it's one way or the other. They're these deep gifts of being able to see things other people don't, right? Figure things out, reveal things that are otherwise hidden. And you definitely have that. And it's really cool when you're working that it's not just psychology and it's not just figuring things out. You actually go to that place too and get like, I think there's something having to do with this, right? And it's like that shamanic piece of where did that come from? I always tell people, like, how do you see things? How do psychics see things? How do people read people? How do they go to the future or the past and get information? And it's like, it's really just a kind of aspect of what I consider, what I say. This, you can tell me if more insight about this, but like imagination. Like if I said, imagine an animal, like why would you just randomly pick elephant and someone else might randomly pick lion? And it's like, because that's coming from somewhere. Like that's significant. So it's not like you ever just, like, people just make things up. Like it literally comes from something that I believe is that ability to read, right? To see or to pick up on information. So tell me, how that is for you, or maybe tell everyone how we met. See, give an example of how this happens, I think.
Man, it is a fun story. And I want to answer or provide some insight into what you just said also
Yeah.
about, how do you see things and what are our gifts and how do we tap into them and know what they are? So there was kind
Yeah.
of a lot there, but God, it was a fun story how we met. I was just starting Everyday Genius. It was I don't know, maybe it was 6 months, maybe not even a year in, maybe. And I had some friends come stay with me, old college friends come stay with me, husband and wife, and they're a really cute kid. And they stayed with me for a week. It was a long time. So I hosted, and it was delightful to have them. Well, as a thank you gift, they gave me a $300 gift certificate to the local bougie hotel spa in Sausalito, where I was living at the time. And it was this $300 gift certificate, which I thought was incredibly generous. I mean, this is a while ago. And I thought, oh, wow, what a great gift. I could get a massage and a facial. And I'm looking through the spa brochure that came with the gift certificate. And, there's all the usuals, facials, mani-pedi, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I could do all that. And then at the very end, the very last offering on the menu was a shamanic destiny retrieval and soul retrieval. And I thought, ooh, what's that? And I thought, and the price was $305, which I would have never spent on my own because I didn't know what it was. But I had this gift certificate and I thought, well, I can get a massage any day. How often can you do a destiny retrieval and a soul retrieval? So I call up Cavallo Point and I book the session. And, you're only there sometimes. So I had to wait a few weeks for the appointment. And in the course of that, some crazy things happened. So anyway, you and I then end up having our session at Cavallo Point. And I remember when you walked in, it was this really surreal experience because I was waiting in the spa lobby having my cucumber water, and you walked in and I saw this crazy bright light on the top of your head, which kind of took me by surprise because this was a point in my journey that these kind of mystical things didn't happen very often. But in the weeks between me booking the appointment and seeing you, a couple of crazy things did happen. So you walk in, you've got this huge bright light on your head. It took me by surprise. I was not expecting what you look like. I thought a shaman was going to be like in a poncho with like, dreadlocks and beads. You were like in chinos and a polo shirt or something. And I was like, that's my shaman. All right. So we go in the session room and then you said something. I think it started off our session that completely tripped me out. You said, Taryn, I bet you've had a few big cat experiences lately. And I thought, oh, how do you know that? Because here's what had happened. I was walking on a hiking trail. It's a very, very busy trail in Marin. And maybe, I don't know, not even probably 50 yards away, I saw this big mountain lion. And it was weird because there was a moment in time when the trail wasn't busy, and it's always busy, but it was this weird moment in time where it wasn't. And I see this mountain lion not that far away. And we just stared at each other for, I don't know, it seemed like 10 minutes. It was probably two. And I wasn't scared, but I thought, this is so weird, like that this would be there and I'm here and there's no one else. It was just like this moment was like, whoa. But then the crazy thing happened about 2 days before our appointment. I remember it was like a scene in a movie. I was sleeping and I bolted straight up out of bed because I'd seen this black jaguar paw just scrape its paws across the front of my vision. And it kind of left this like red jaguar claw mark. And I just heard, pay attention. And I was like, whoa. So when I had my session with you and you said, I bet you had some big cat experiences lately. I was like, I did. How did you know? Let me tell you about them. And then that's what kicked off the whole thing. And that's what started our friendship and journey together.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, there's there's an interesting lesson in that because I often tell people with regards to power animals, especially and stuff like that, like it can show up in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't always have to be like that's pretty profound what happened to you. That's not going to happen to everybody, right?
It's cool.
But it could be a truck driving by with a lion on the side, or it could be somebody wearing a t-shirt that had like there are if you're paying attention, the universe conspires to sort of like give you what you need, and it's often subtle. It's often you have to kind of really be paying attention. And of course, in hindsight, you can go back and go, wow, that's amazing that I just saw that yesterday. Everybody has these experiences of synchronicities, right? Oh, I just thought of a thing and it showed up on a TV commercial, the word that I just thought of. I mean, or somebody, you think of somebody and they call. So these things happen all the time, right? But it's like, what's the point? Right? Like, what's the practical
Yeah.
application?
So back to passion and purpose and kind of that earlier
Yeah.
part. So this has actually happened to me in just exactly what you're saying in a much more subtle way, just in this last 2024
Mm.
calendar year.
Hmm.
I was on a podcast and I went into the studio to be on the podcast because that's where it was. And the studio podcast producer said, Taryn, you're really good. You should really make a podcast. And I just blew it off. This is probably back in July or August. And I just thought, I'm not going to do a podcast. It has now probably 8 or 9 people, because I've been keeping count, have said, Taryn, you need to do a podcast. And finally, you hear it enough and you just think to yourself, obviously, this is the universe telling me to do a podcast. And I'm launching my new podcast coming up, the Everyday Genius Show. But it wasn't because I just had this great, lightning bolt epiphany like I did for Everyday Genius. This was the universe just like, do podcast, do podcast, do podcast, do podcast. And finally, I'm like, fine, I'll do the podcast,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
and it's been fun following you because you have, there's this whole concept. I think I just posted a podcast. I had written an article a while back and I'm redoing those as podcasts now. And they're it's funny because 15 years ago, but like super relevant today, which is usually the case.
Ahead of your
Usually
time. I know it.
ridiculous, right? But the the upshot of it was that oh shoot, I lost I lost the thread now.
Well, that's all
Um,
right.
yeah,
Because,
no, but the point. Oh well, I forget. It'll
well,
come back.
it's okay because I actually wanted to tap into something else that you were saying because it relates, I think, to this conversation around, the universe is talking to you. Sometimes it's the jaguar paw across the front of your face, pay attention. Sometimes it's the, you should do
Yeah,
a podcast. You should do a podcast. It's the, it's the lion on a truck or, like the signs can be subtle. They can be not subtle. And it kind of just depends, I think, on what each person needs. But what I've really come to realize in the journey of tapping into everyday genius is this idea, and you do this so beautifully, help people find their passion, their purpose, what they're supposed to do, and, have it find them. Here's kind of how I think about it in a very linear way, which I don't think this is really actually how creation works, but I think it's a nice way to think about it, which is like every soul kind of comes off the like soul line, like, it's like the baby factory, right? And it comes off the line and it has a unique thumbprint, a unique signature energy, right? We can't all be good at the same thing. It wouldn't be interesting. That's not how the creation wants to work. The creation wants to be all things and experience all aspects, all things. And so every soul kind of comes off the line with a thumbprint of like, hey, you're going to be really good at this thing and you're going to be really good at this thing. And so then we come into this earth, we have an experience where that's what excites us, is doing that thing that we're kind of wired to do on a soul level. And we may do it in very different ways, even over the course of one lifetime, because what interests us, we can explore it. But it's usually exploring angles of the same thing or the same
Right.
theme from different angles.
Good
So,
point.
just to give an example of that, I had a very long career in the corporate world and in
Right.
different angles of the corporate world and then entrepreneurship world. And, they were all part of the same passion. They just experienced from different perspectives.
Right.
And I think that's often how genius works. It's like genius is something that we have. Like we have a genius. And for the longest time, what that meant in at least ancient Latin was, someone's sort of innate ability. It was actually only very recently that it ever got tied to intelligence, which is really not the way to think about genius.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
that idea of like what's your passion and your purpose, I think in some ways people like that because we feel like there is something important for us to do. But I think the more technically correct way to ask is what's my highest excitement and how can I act on that? Because that has embedded in it your passion and your purpose.
Right. Yeah. You can think of anything like who's the latest like big F1 driver, Verstappen or something, the kid that like his dad taught him and he was just like blowing his dad away and he's like, God, this kid, like he's a genius F1 driver, like Formula One race car driver. But I remembered, thank you. I remembered what you kind of were tapping into it anyway. But so I wrote this article about how in shamanism the student leapfrogs the teacher, right? There's this whole thing in Western culture that it's hierarchical. If you're good, your teacher must be that much better, right? And it's completely the opposite in the way we look at the world, which is you go on the shoulders of it's cumulative. Like whatever your teacher learned, you get through these initiation processes and teachings, and then you take it to a new level. And I just like that's been my favorite concept because my work has been great. There's been a lot of great results that come from it, and people kind of try to associate it with me. And I go, no, it's the team. It's not really. I have some ability to like mediate and translate and come up with analogies and explain things. But man, the work really comes from this other place. And then so I look at your work and I think for on some level you can consider your I think we did a little we went to Peru together and we did a little I did a little teaching, so you're that next that next generation essentially of what I learned. And it's like I've just been thrilled to watch how you've taken all of what I've ever done and to just a completely whole new level. I mean, it's just, and I couldn't do it. Like if someone said, "Oh, just do what Taryn's doing, John. It's great." She's got all these things going on. Like you've worked with what SpaceX and Google and Gates Foundation. Like you've done huge work in the world where you've taken the work that I do, like facilitating freedom and empowerment and basic healing, if you will. And you've taken it places that I just wouldn't have had. I just wouldn't have had what it takes to do that. And you have it, and it's just so cool, right? And this is what I want to share with people. I want people to know, like, don't ask John to come in and like run your company's new rocket team. Ask Taryn. Like that. Taryn can do that. She's got everything I got and that and more of even what I got shamanically. So this is what I love because it's not about first of all, it's not about us. It's not about like, oh, I want to die someday known as an amazing. It's like, no, I want me to live through and continue the work through anyone who I've inspired, right? Who somehow we cross paths and because of that, have gone on to develop these gifts and use them, right? To me, that's exciting. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah,
it's
you were, thank you for those beautifully kind words. You were incredibly instrumental on the journey because you were kind of the one that put me on the path. And again, that's why I even went to shaman school to learn these gifts, was because I just had this idea. I was like, wow, John's really intuitive. What if I could be more intuitive, deconstructing people's genius? And that was the catalyst that I think allowed me to do this work at a level that is now kind of interesting. I mean, at the time when I first started, it was good, but now I think it's reached new heights because I've taken it to a different place, just kind of on my journey and being more intuitive. But it's this idea that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, it has to be, right? Otherwise, every stoll would come in and we'd be, still in the Stone Ages, right? We all
right.
stand on the shoulders of giants, take what's already been done and make it something new or something different or something elevated. And that's just kind of how I think evolution happens, which is amazing. And I think it's fulfilling as also being a teacher myself, to people. Like, it's really fulfilling to see people take ideas and do something cool with them. So I understand that sentiment.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
And I wanted to just so that part about learning the gifts, like you kind of mentioned that. It's like and you did a recent, I think, YouTube short on this, if I'm not mistaken, about the fact that it's an uncovering of what's already there. Like, I think people get a little bit intimidated or daunted by the fact of, how am I ever going to learn to be intuitive or learn to see things other people don't? And it's like, no, like, that's an inherent ability. And there are things that may be in the way of it. And it's usually the mind, right? It's usually limiting beliefs and conditioning and, experiences that shut us down. I mean, I can't tell you how many people who ended up becoming shamans, doing great work, who started by getting a session from me. And it's like, had, like, when they were kids, see things, talk to beings, talk to spirit, talk to nature, have visions and premonitions and all this kind of stuff, and then they were told, no, that's evil, or you're crazy, and shut it down. And I think there's more of that than anything. I think most people have this ability if they just let it be uncovered. Does that ring true to
Yeah, I
you?
did. I did a video, and I even think I did a blog post or a newsletter on this topic of, and this is sort of the secondary benefit of learning to become a healer myself, is that there is a lot of layers in the way from people's true soul shining in many cases, right? Like you just said, beliefs, traumas, fears, all this kind of thing. And so there's this desire for the soul to shine and share its gifts in the most authentic way. And sometimes we put these layers that prevent that. And so a lot of my work over the last 15 years has been kind of like you, to help people remove those layers to let their true genius shine through. And I think this is really a lot of your work too. I mean, and that's really, I think, the goal of any healer is, how do you help people remove all of that, heal all of that, so that more of themselves can come through, because that is really where the genius is. And so that healing aspect, I think, is really important in this work, because not everybody comes out of the gate just, on fire and nothing gets in their way. I mean, that's very few people. It does exist, but it's not that often, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I think we all have a quote unquote genius. I think if I were to say I had one, it's that I really do see how spirit or the divine moves through people in a unique way. And it's a gift I think I've always had, but that I've honed over time, and I've gotten better and faster at it. It was actually in our session when we were deconstructing your genius, which was a really fun one, because you think, oh my God, how does a shaman do it? It just seems so
Yeah,
mystical.
yeah, I remember you
And
tried it before, and with
yeah,
MLP Spay or somebody, went like our teacher's teacher, and he was like, I'm not
yeah.
ready.
Well, sometimes what happens when you really tap into somebody's gifts is you tap into their ability to connect into the divine, and it feels very sacred. And unpacking that and making it linear can be incredibly uncomfortable,
Yeah.
because you think, oh, but this is a magic gift I have. And yes, the connection feels magical, but there's always a structure to magic. And I thought, to the point about revealing, what came through when we deconstructed your genius, which is really this ability to reveal an impossibility and, bring it into reality. I thought it was really cool the way you said that. You didn't say I need to come up with an impossible idea that's going to create a big change. I need to, architect it, create it. It was none of that. It was reveal it. And the
Yeah.
how that you did that was really cool, which is that you just say to yourself, well, John, I can't do it. I'm just little John here on earth. I can't do it. But if I go someplace in the quantum field, and I don't think these were the words you used, but this was kind of what happened, right? If I go someplace, it can be revealed to me how this impossible thing can happen. And then I can just kind of make it happen and pull it back in. And I
Yeah.
thought it was an interesting word choice because often to your point with the mind, we think we have to do it, we have to create it, we have to think about it, we have to track it, like all the mind things. And your strategy was a good one. It was no, I just need to kind of step myself back and let it be revealed to me.
Yeah, get
And,
rid of
and
the
it's
limited mind.
strategy
And the
genius.
funny thing is, like, I never would have been able to explain this to anyone until we worked together. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like I've been around for a while, okay, and I've been doing this for 30 years. And if someone said, like, what do you do? I wouldn't have came up with those words until we worked together. It's amazing. Like, honestly, it was like, wow. For the first time, I kind of know I could actually like articulate what I'm doing. And I just like, oh, it's the best, right? And I wanted to say people can go to your where are you posting things like on YouTube, on LinkedIn. I've seen things, right? You have we'll post links to all that, but
I mean, I'm on
basically,
all
like,
the platforms.
people
Yeah.
can go see how you work with people one on one and the insights you get and all the wisdom that's coming from all of this through you, which is amazing. And they can do it. They can sign up, right, and go work with you, right? This
Yeah.
is
The Genius Lab is fun.
I know it's amazing. But so what I'm curious about, what I'd love for you to elaborate on is how does it look when you're doing this with a group or a corporation like you did? Like I understand the one-on-one stuff, and I know how to work the work I do as a shaman with individuals, couples, and large groups. I've done it. I have a way of doing it that I kind of had to figure out on my own. But what did, like, for example, what did you do when you went into SpaceX, right? Like, I see these rockets going off every day. Obviously it's working. They're not they're and I've used Starlink. It's amazing. It's all really cool stuff. But I have no concept of how you did it. So can you explain a little bit, like, if a group calls you up, a startup, any organization, anything, says, Taryn, come help us. What do you do? What are you thinking and what do you do?
Well, SpaceX was hands down of all the zillions of clients I've worked with, hands down my favorite. I felt like it was my soul family. I felt like these were my people. And
Yeah.
just not just the brilliance of people, but the ability that the culture has there to
Mm,
people are incredibly empowered. They get more done in a week than most companies get done in a year or 2 years. And that is not hyperbole. That is just the God's honest truth. And there's just this culture of massive empowerment. So everyone's operating at full capacity because there's really nothing in their way. And that's a very cultural thing. At SpaceX, I got to work one-on-one with, quite a few executives and help them on their journey. And then they became better leaders for their team. And that was sort of the project at SpaceX. I think to answer your question a bit better, though, this last year I've gotten to work with some, I would call them turnaround situations, companies that were really on the struggle bus and not doing well and needed a 180 to make it, or they weren't. And that's really when you've got to tap into the genius of a team. And if you think about anyone's individual genius, you can kind of track that. And it works though when you get a group of people. There is such thing as a team genius or a company genius. A company has a consciousness like a person, right? There is a desire for that company to express itself in a certain way. It's kind of like the divine or the spirit moves through a company, just the way it moves through people. And being able to tap into what that is, and again, remove all the layers that is in the way of this company to let it shine through is not dissimilar than doing it for an individual person. You've just got to get the group together and do it as a group together. And so there's been a couple of organizations that have really helped in a turnaround. And that's what we did, right? We had to refine where their excitement was because they had one in particular I'm thinking of is they were just doing too many things and none of them they were great at. But what happens is like, the branches of a tree just get too big, and at a certain point you got to prune and
Yeah.
let that energy move through a much smaller space, rather than all these tentacles, which is what happens when, companies stop doing well, is there's just too many tentacles and the energy's too dispersed. You got to like refocus it back in and let the most powerful energy move through a much smaller space.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like a person, right? Like it's easy to get distracted and do a million things and do none of them well. If you kind of prune all that back and you focus yourself more, in a more focused way, a lot more can move through you in a much tighter sort of funnel. So with a company, that's always my thing, is I'm tracking where's the excitement and energy of this company, the genius of the company, and how do we prune it all the way, focus on that, and then tweak it to be better, because obviously it needs, if it was working, they wouldn't have added all these things. Usually there's something that needs to, be innovated on. And in this one company in particular, it was that. I mean, they needed a new CEO. They needed to refocus. They needed to trim like 80% of their offerings. And they needed everybody on the bus to like really innovate on something new. And that all happened. Now, with a company, things don't often change overnight. Things take a while, right? You got a lot of people that need to get on the same bus.
Right.
But the genesis of that work is really done, in this case, it was done in an offsite and some kind of ongoing coaching. But it's been a turnaround.
That's cool. Yeah. So it kind of makes me think of one thing, which is oftentimes, I mean, this is probably true for any kind of healing modality. Certainly for myself, people will come to me when it's bad enough, right? When like they're like, all right, I'm desperate. My friend said you should go see this shaman, like, and they're like, I don't know, I need, and it's probably the same for a company and a group, and it's like I think there's tremendous opportunity or value here in people getting the idea that they could do this when things are going well, that this would actually benefit them before it goes sideways, right? Like, wouldn't it doesn't that make sense? You made me think of that, because I'm like, well, what about the companies where everything's just dialed and they're like killing it, and it's like Nvidia, they got the chip and they're just killing it. It's like if they don't start this process now, right, then there's a missed opportunity, right? Like I think there's always an opportunity for anyone, no matter how good things are going, to look a little deeper, to learn a little bit more, to clear things before they manifest. Does that make sense? Do you agree with
You took the words out of my mouth, and this company that I was talking about is owned by a private equity firm, and I chatted with the owner of the private equity, and I said, if you'd have called me 6 months or a year ago, you have no idea how much further you would be.
that?
Trying to
Wow.
do a turnaround when you're almost dead is really a lot harder than taking a healthy person and making them even more healthy, right?
Yeah. No,
It's just the delta is so much, the miracle has to be so much bigger, and it is doable.
yeah.
Miracles of that size are doable. It takes so much more energy and so much more, I almost say drama, because so much has to change quickly to make that turnaround happen. It's kind of like you're driving a bus, right?
Yeah. The momentum.
Making a
Right.
hard right,
Oh,
like a lot of stuff moves around. It's not super pleasant. Whereas if you just kind of make a gentle right, it's so much more
no,
pleasant.
totally. I mean, for
Yeah.
this reason, I've actually had clients that like they got pregnant and they're like, can you do a session on my baby before it's born? I'm like, brilliant idea. Like they won't have to struggle through 18, 20, 30, 40 years of what's going on and then finally come to a shaman. I think every organization should have a genius department or a shaman department, right? There should be somebody like an HR person. Like there should be somebody in every organization whose job it is to do what you do primarily.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Back to being
amazing.
ahead of our time.
Every organization.
I was at an organization recently and I pitched this. I said, you guys, your problem is actually at the hiring point. You're not hiring right. I
Mm,
said, you're hiring for someone's kind of intellect and resume, not for their passion. And this is why you get the wrong people in here.
yeah.
Because if you think about, you have to sort of understand the mechanics of how genius works, right? Genius is really about operating on your highest passion and your highest excitement. And why does that make it genius? Because in every case, genius people that are really good at what they do are accessing kind of this quantum field to pull in ideas, information, insights, moments that are perfect into their work. And that's what makes their work brilliant. But that only comes through passion and excitement. The quantum field is not accessed from this intellectual place of the mind. It's accessed through the heart and through that connection to all that is, right? Is it's
Yeah.
a heart
It's like
connection.
manifesting requires the feeling place of the thing, not.
So if you're hiring because, someone's like, well, I've got all this intellect and, I've done it for 25 years and whatever. The question is it still their passion and excitement? Because if it's not, they're going to show up and they're just not jazzed. And that brilliant work doesn't come through. So if you want a more genius company, how are you bringing people in the door? Is it their passion? Is their excitement? And then more importantly, and this was the second issue that this organization had, was they would bring great people in. And even if it was their passion and their excitement, there wasn't enough empowerment in the company. It was just like layer after layer. Everything was difficult. And so your passion just got sort of stamped out because it was so hard to get anything done.
Totally.
And back to SpaceX. I mean, this is where I think SpaceX as an organization is genius. There is no barriers to getting stuff done. Everybody is operating at full capacity. And so your passion and excitement can just thrive. And that is by design at the organization. And most organizations should pay attention because that is really, in all the places I've been, probably the most empowered organization I've been to, just in terms of their people.
Yeah.
And so you got to bring in two things, right? Number one, you got to kind of get people in that are passionate, excited. And number two, you've got to allow that to thrive by not creating so many layers, barriers, approvals, bureaucracy, just all the stuff that gets in the way of that.
Yeah.
And it's back to like, you got to sometimes prune the tree, you know?
Yeah, no, this reminds me of my own personal experience when I was young, getting out of high school, 17, getting ready to go to college, super passionate about space, synchronistically with we're talking about SpaceX, but I wanted to be an astronaut. I was designing space stations as a little kid, stuff like that. And this was my passion. And someone told me, oh, someone at NASA said, oh, you should get a degree in electrical engineering because that's, a little safer and you'll be able to like do other work if the space program dies and all that. And I started going, I went to school to get a degree in electrical engineering. And it just destroyed my passion. I was bogged down in the math and the junk around engineering, and I lost sight of the whole concept of becoming an astronautical engineer, whatever. And that was it. That was the end. That was the end of that. Like that, it's a prime example to me of what you're talking about. Like if you don't nurture, if they didn't, if the guy at NASA would have said, "Hey, come on in on the weekends and watch what we do and add some ideas and participate," I'd have been on fire. I would have like, sure, I would have maybe gone and got some education too, but it wouldn't have killed my passion, right? Like yeah. Anyway, and I think it just occurred to me too, like how amazing would it be for this to be like a college or a university course? Like part of you, because people don't go off and get a job for the most part in things without learning a little something for like right, you go to school, you learn something, then you go work in it, and it doesn't like things again, it kind of goes back to that notion of things don't have to be wrong or broken for you to seek out help from someone like you or me, like freeing and empowering and increasing and elevating and all the things that you do and inspiring. Like this could be something that if it was done as part of your preparation and just growing up, imagine what the world could be like. Like imagine all the problems that could be solved. You have a bunch of passionate like high school kids, for God's sake,
Oh, and you see them on
going,
the
I know what I
news.
like and I know what
Yeah.
my genius is and put me to work. you know?
Yeah. I love that you brought that up because this is really, if I leave this planet, I hope that one impact I have is to help people redesign the education system because
Hmm.
at a young age, there's no opportunity in the public school system to follow your passion or excitement. It just does not exist. Maybe in an
Yeah,
after school
most,
program, but
even the
not
private
in
system.
class,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
Unless you get lucky and get one of those really amazing teachers that can kind of
yeah.
encourage that. And they're out there. I mean, I certainly had one, but um, when we're passionate and excited, that is where genius happens. And it's because we can tap into something bigger. That's where the ideas flow. It's a much higher vibrational state. And at a higher vibrational state, you have access to higher vibrational information. I mean, if you just want to talk about it from a shamanic standpoint, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, this is like physics. I mean, I'm not even talking about anything spiritual. Like, this
Right.
is physics.
True.
And so you're passionate, you're excited, you're in this sort of elevated vibrational state. You're tapping into elevated vibrational energies where more is available to you to pull in. And that is kind of then allows genius work to happen. And wouldn't you want a universe full of geniuses or a world full of geniuses? Of course we do, but we don't think like that. We think, well, they need to learn this, this, and this, and unless they're learning all this, they're not going to be good citizens. It's the wrong way to think. It's like, yes, we need to read and write and do some math. Like, this is all true just to
Yeah.
function in this society. But beyond that, like, people will learn more when they're excited. And how do you kind of funnel that? So I agree. It should be a fundamental focus of education to design around that.
Right.
And
Start with this as
you start with this, and then you kind of
or you,
layer on the thing, right? And then
yeah.
the other thing that I've just noticed, and certainly, God bless my father, because he loves me, he said when I was in college, I was passionate about business. I still am. He said, well, don't do a marketing degree. That's not going to make you any money. You need finance. You need a practical, hard skill. And so I actually double majored. Uh, and in one of my double majors was in finance. The other one, I kind of created a major around business leadership, which was really more my passion. And again, it was out of love. Like, he wanted me to make sure I had a hard skill that would make money. But to your point, I mean, while I get finance and while I'm in some ways glad that I know it because, I understand how the world works a bit, it was certainly not my passion. and
Yeah.
they were kind of like my least favorite drag classes. And I got bogged down a bit in it.
Yeah.
And it was out of love that he told me that, you know, and it's not
Yeah.
that it hasn't served me, but I think what would parents would do to serve their kids more is say, you know what, I believe in you. I believe in you that no matter what your passion and excitement is, there is a way for you to make magic happen and support yourself and do it in a way that maybe no one else has even thought of. And I believe in you. And if I can be here to support you, I will. It's a
Yeah.
better message, right? Because why would the universe give you
Totally.
a passion and excitement without a way for it to support you or a way for it to drop in an idea that allows you to go like, oh my God, I could make money in this way that no one even thought of before.
Yeah. Well, and it's like the love fear columns,
Mhm.
we all know about this. It's like, if you're making a decision, is it really out of love or out of fear? Did he tell you that really out of love, or was it fear that you wouldn't, get what you want or be successful based on his love for you? So it's like the only ones that work are the love column, right? The fear always kind of ends up dying out, ultimately. And so let's just before we wrap it up, I want to talk about because I think this is a good segue because just this last little bit of the conversation, this should be in every college, this should be in every organization, like, which means there needs to be a lot more of you. We can't do it all, right? You can't be in every boardroom. So, and neither can I, right? For that matter, right? Which is what excites me about a lot of people learning and owning these gifts. But having said that, your next step, right? Because it makes me think of how can you be supported? How can Taryn be supported in getting this whole concept out in a way that eventually leads to more people going, "Ooh, I want to do what Taryn does. Ooh, I want to, I can do that." And or companies or corporations or political organizations, you name it, anything, anywhere, going, oh, yeah, this is a new thing. Like, this is a thing. You have to have an HR department, and you have to have a finance department, and you have to have an R&D department, and you have to have a genius department. You have to have a growth, exploration, deepening, broadening, deepening, learning your genius. You know what I mean? Like, how are we going to do that, Taryn? Like, I don't, like, how are we going to do this? What do you need? What do you need to do this? I know you're doing your Everyday Genius TV, and like, yes, we need a channel on TV about all of this, for example. What's your vision of how we can get this, because this is pivotal. Like, this is huge. This is huge. This could be the thing that solves, the world problems if it's implemented, or at least understood, right, and
Well,
practiced.
I don't think anyone would disagree with the statement that we need more genius now than ever because there's so many opportunities for us, whether it's with new energy solutions, and I'm really
Yeah.
jazzed about free energy, which I think is coming. It's changing education. It's living in a way that we're all more fulfilled and happy. I mean, there's just so many. It's better healthcare. It's more vibrant living. It's like all these things that I think humanity is like. You know what? We can be more than what we are. We just need to start making some changes. And
And
so I really,
AI can do a
yeah.
lot of these calculations to figure these things out, but what is it missing? It's missing the intuition. It's missing, like, it's amazing.
AI
Like
is
space,
getting scary good, and I mean that as a compliment.
it's
But it does. It
scary.
misses. It misses intuition. It misses that ability to tap into something where things can be revealed, right?
Right.
To me, everyday genius is a movement, and it's demystifying what genius is and how it works, and really the movement is educating people and enlightening others who are interested in like how does it work? How can I do this more in my own life? How can I tap into more of my gifts, my abilities, bring that to light? How can I learn from others who are really brilliant at what they do and kind of crib their strategies to make my own better? And and if we're all operating from that place where our gifts are operating at full capacity, this will be a very, very bright world.
Hmm.
And so to me, the movement is, join the movement. Come join me and have the conversation. I'm on all the social platforms. Join my show when it launches here in the next handful of weeks. Um, and if you're interested, come into the Genius Lab because when you can really understand how your own genius works, it is a transformative experience and it makes you better at what you do, but it allows you to see the genius in others more clearly as well.
Yeah.
And we get enough people kind of doing that. I think it will change things at a certain point too. So, how do your answer is how do we change the world, right? Well, I think
Yeah.
we do it kind of, a person at a time. Join the movement, really be inspired by exploring your own gifts, your own genius and shining them at full capacity. And if you don't know what they are, that's a fun exploration to start.
Yeah. And this isn't quick TikTok fix. You're like, well, you can get on Reels and TikTok and see all kinds of, like, cool, clever, wise folks. You and I, that's not our thing so much, right? Like we can do quips and we can add that, but this is bigger than this is not something that's going to happen by people just sort of seeing a reel and going, "Oh, that's cool." Right? Like, you have to do the work.
Yeah,
This has to be available to actually dive in and do. This isn't just mind drugs. This isn't just like, oh, that felt good to see or hear, right? This is a bigger deal to me anyway. This, right?
yeah, and this is where, on the one hand, you had to hold two truths at once, right? Everybody's on social
Right.
media, so
Sure.
how do I get better at explaining very complex things quickly and easily on social media because that is where people are, and yet provide a way to go deeper, which is really where you're going to get the depth of understanding about this for yourself and for others. And so it's sort of, holding both truths that this is not really soundbitey kind of material, and yet there are some genius nuggets in the sound bites, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So
There are nuggets. Yeah.
I hear that. I'm excited for the show. I truly am because it's really a chance to take people like you who've been in my Genius Lab. And the Genius Lab, these interviews are, it's 3 hours. And
Yeah.
often I do it over 2 days. We just did one day
But what's
because
cool is I characterize it like you can work with Shaman John for a year and you could do multiple sessions. But in 3 hours, you go work with Taryn, you'll get everything. Like, it's
it's
literally a
deep.
year's
Yeah.
worth of deep, hard work in like 3 hours. It's hard to some degree, but it's also super fun. So
Yeah, and the reason it's hard is that you've got to slow down what
yeah,
usually happens like that in your mind. And it's hard to do when you're being interviewed to be like, well, I don't know, I just do it. Well, picking it apart piece by piece and taking that thing and unpacking the 25 steps that's there. That's the kind of the hard work, is because you have to think in a way you've just never had to think before. So that's kind of the hard
How
part.
change happens. That's everything.
Yeah, and that's where
You
the really
change
juicy
something, it's
stuff
hard
is.
to change.
So what will be fun is that, watching a 3-hour interview is not particularly entertaining media. However, having you back, let's say in
Yeah.
the studio, where we can talk about what happened in the Genius Lab on a podcast and take some of the really more brilliant insights that came out and talk about them and share them in a way that can be accessible to others, I think is really going to be a fun format. And it goes beyond a traditional interview, because it's not just, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? I mean, this is deep. Like, how are you thinking about it in a way that you didn't even know? And I think that's what makes it kind of a unique show style.
Oh, it's amazing, right? I mean, because like we all love interviews, like on Jimmy Kimmel and other podcasts and things like that, and you learn a little bit about something that you didn't know, and that's cool. But you're right. This is like not only do you learn something that's entertaining, but you learn something you can then use, you can take away, and you can apply in your own life, and you can.
Yeah, everybody has a strategy that, so I interviewed a CEO and a minister and a kid whisperer, and all of them have strategies that, while they are unique to their discipline, are totally applicable to anybody in their
Yeah.
life. Like how a
Yeah.
kid whisperer does what she does. I'm not even a parent. I was like, man, that's a good strategy. I'm going to use that. And yours, which we talked about earlier, is this whole idea where you kind of go into this place that is the
Yeah.
infinite and have something revealed. I thought, well, that's easier than what I've been trying to do sometimes. And it's a strategy that I can apply. Anyone can apply. And that really is my goal, is to illuminate strategies, whether or not you care about the person's work. There's a strategy in there that you can crib and do it in your own life and make yourself better, which I think is a really cool thought.
Yeah, totally. And I want listeners to understand this that you don't have to know anyone that you think needs this. You don't have to feel like you need this. That's not the point. The point is find Taryn, say, yep, I'm willing to try it, because you don't even know yet what you don't know. You know what I mean? Like you don't even know yet what's holding you back. And you don't want to wait till you know. Like you don't want to wait till it's like in your experience with your relationship or your health or your resources or your job or whatever. So there's that. And you share it. Like please, like just blast what is it? Everydaygenius.tv
TV.
is your website. Like, like I don't know what this like, even if from this podcast you don't even understand what we're talking about, trust me, blast it out, get it out, because it's gonna make a difference in the world in a way that has yet. I have not met anyone that does what you do, Taryn, and so it's new. This is a new thing,
I would agree with that.
like new and huge. Like this is a leap, and we know. I mean, I've studied everything. I've paid attention to every kind of work out there, and this just is amazing, and it's time has come. And so I want people to just go, I don't know what this is, but check it out. you
I
know
so appreciate that. I really appreciate that. Thank you for the kind
yeah.
words. One
No, I
thing I
mean, I
think
mean it.
people
I just know that it's what
Yeah, one thing people get
you
hung up on is, well, I'm not a genius. I can't possibly come into the Genius Lab. And that is really the opposite of my intention, which is we're all on the journey to genius, and it's a continuum. Whether you're just starting something, you've reached an excellent point, or you're on really a mastery level, it doesn't matter. It's all the same journey, just at a different point. And the Genius Lab is designed for any point, whether it's an individual or a company, because you can always take it to the next level. And what's cool about the Genius Lab for individuals or for teams is that wherever you're at, then we take it to whatever that next level is. And there's always a next level. So whether
there's
you're
always
early or
next
late,
level
yeah,
that you don't know about. They don't even know.
don't
Like
even
that's
know.
my point. Like you don't even have to suspect it. You just have to recognize that it's there, and this is how you get there. And this is the best way to get there, the easiest way, the quickest way. Trust me, there are harder ways to do stuff, and you don't really want to have to do those. So yeah. So anyway, I think that's the whole reason I wanted to share you, and I hope that yeah, I mean, we'll just keep going. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep doing this, and yeah. So we'll post the links and everything, but it's pretty simple. Everydaygenius.tv is, you go there, you're accessible. They can reach out to you for any reason, right? Um, and we'll get this going. Get this out there. I think it'll be great.
Yeah, thank you, John. I really have enjoyed this conversation and talking about genius and sharing a bit of your genius. And it's just been a really fun conversation. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's breathed new life and more passion into my own life and work. So I can thank you for that. And yeah, so we'll see what's next. We'll do more,
I
right? I
love it.
look forward to being maybe on your podcast too, right?
Oh,
But
I'm gonna have you on. Yeah,
yeah,
we're gonna share your strategy. Honestly, it was so brilliant that I had a moment where I thought, God, that's good. We need to share that.
I know, right? Very good. All right. Well, thanks again,
Thank you,
and
John.
thank everybody for tuning in, and appreciate your support. And we'll talk soon.